should arm themselves with a variety of skills and knowledge. Strengthening semiconductor ecosystem in the works. Good evening and Salam Malaysia Madani. You're watching Malaysia Tonight. I am Olivia Nicholas. Human Resources Minister Stephen Sim Chi Keong has called on the youth to equip themselves with various knowledge and skills to navigate the era of globalization successfully, given that flexible working hours are now being practiced worldwide. Elaborating further, Sim said that flexible working hours are enshrined in sections 60P and 60Q of the Employment Act 1955 Amendment 2022, where employees have the right to request flexible work arrangements from the employers, including changes to working hours, days and location, subject to Part 12 or any provisions stated in the contract of service. Therefore, he said employers are not confined to hiring remote workers, but can also opt for foreign employees who potentially lower wages who do not need to be physically present in the office. The minister noted that the Human Resources Ministry, with the new branding and 3K commitment, kebajikan, kemahiran, keberhasilan pekerja, acknowledges the different perspective of youth that salaries are no longer the main attraction, but flexible working arrangements have become one of the most important criteria for job selection. He said this at the Luncheon Talk Human Resource Policy from Youth Perspective held recently in conjunction with the Labour Day celebration. The newly appointed Board of Directors of Digital National Berhad DNB will convene a meeting next Tuesday. According to Digital Minister Gobind Singh Dio, the meeting is to look into the due diligence report regarding the 5G share sale agreement SSA before making any recommendation on the directions of the second 5G network soon to be established.
Perkara-perkara yang dipertimbangkan.
Perjanjian tersebut disebut beberapa perkara perlu dilaksanakan. Satu daripadanya adalah kita perlu mengadakan satu due diligence proses. Selepas due diligence itu is completed, ia lengkap, ianya akan dikemukakan kepada pengarah-pengarah syarikat yang perlu dilantik, dan pengarah-pengarah syarikat telah pun dilantik minggu lalu.
Gobind said this after witnessing the signing of a memorandum of understanding between DNB and Ericsson with enterprise partners to advance 5G for enterprises at DNB's headquarters today. The minister highlighted that the directors will have a look and examine the due diligence report on the SSA before coming up with recommendations on the way forward after the period of 20 days. According to Gobind, the government's position is clear that the second 5G network would be introduced after certain preconditions of the SSA between mobile network operators and DNB have been met.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, YB.
Moving on, the government is working to strengthen the semiconductor ecosystem in producing quality products that are trusted at both local and international levels. Economy Minister Rasmi said that they are in the process of formulating a policy to enable a portion of the country's industry to use local chips at a first step.
Jadi itu antara perkara-perkara yang dipertimbangkan oleh kementerian-kementerian, bagaimana kita membantu di peringkat awal ini untuk memudahkan firma-firma yang berkecimpung dalam reka cipta semiconductor ini paling kurang mempunyai lonjakan awal. Kalau tidak, mereka perlu bersaing 100% dengan pemain-pemain global di seluruh dunia.
The minister also mentioned that the ecosystem involves semiconductor sector innovators in enhancing the marketability of their products. It was conveyed during the National Institute of Public Administration or Intan Ministers Conversation 2024 program or IMC 2024, where high-ranking government leaders and civil servants discussed high-impact and large-scale matters.
The social security organisation SOCSO will hold roadshows nationwide to provide information on the Housewife Social Security Scheme SKSSR to company employees and women from the B40 group.
SOCSO Committee on the SKSSR Chairman Kasturi Patu said that the first 7 sessions, which are 6th, 7th and 13th May and 2nd, 12th, 18th and 23rd of July will be held at Wisma Pekeso, Kuala Lumpur and will involve private sector employers, statutory bodies, government-linked companies, non-governmental organizations and other institutions. She said that the roadshows are being implemented following the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding MOU between SOCSO and Yayasan Kebajikan Negara Malaysia YKNM on the 14th of March regarding income tax exemption under Section 44 subsection 6 of the Income Tax Act 1967.
Impak daripada sesi jerayawara ini dijangka akan meningkatkan keterjaminan perlindungan sosial yang lebih komprehensif melalui perlindungan SKSSR khusus untuk pekerja wanita serta isteri pekerja dengan pengecualian cukai bagi kategori wanita B40 atau M40.
She also said that as of 21st of April, a total of 253,794 women had contributed under the SKSSR, and the cumulative amount of claims and interest payments to contributors from the 1st of January 2023 to the 15th of April this year was more than 1 million ringgit. Currently, Sarawak recorded the highest number of SKSSR registrations at 56,128, followed by Sabah 49,780, Selangor 16,867, among others.
Selangor civil servants will get a pay rise in line with Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim's salary hike announcement on the 1st of May. Menteri Besar Dato Sri Amiruddin Syari stated that the salary adjustment involving 21,736 state civil servants would be implemented after the Selangor government receives their relevant circular from the federal government.
Sudah pasti kerajaan negeri akan melaras sebaik perkeliling dikeluarkan, kita akan melaras semua gaji-gaji itu sesuai dengan peningkatan gaji penjawat awam yang diumumkan oleh pihak kerajaan persekutuan pada 1 Mei yang lepas.
He said this during a press conference at Wisma Dewan Negeri Selangor today. Elaborating further, Dato Sri Amiruddin emphasised that the salary increase should serve as a guide and motivation for all civil servants and for productivity to be strengthened. He suggested that the private sector follow suit with the Prime Minister's public sector salary hike announcement to ensure the continuous rise of Malaysian income, leading towards achieving high-income nation status and addressing the escalating cost of living. On the 1st of May, the Prime Minister announced a salary increase for civil servants of over 13% effective from December.
Pulau Pinang expects to achieve zero hardcore poverty status by the end of this month as a result of the federal government's efforts and initiatives in organising various programs, including establishing strategic collaboration between agencies.
Penang Bumi Putra Participation Coordination Division BPPBPP Implementation Coordination Unit ICU Director Dr. Shaharuddin Shah Muhammad Noor said that based on its data, 4,949 people were recorded in the hardcore poor category as of 31st of January. But he noted that as a result of all the mitigation programs being carried out, the total was reduced to 117 people as of 24th of April, and the division continued to see positive development, and the number has now come down to 45 people. Dr. Shaharuddin added that they expect Pulau Pinang and 2 other northern states, Perak and Perlis, to achieve zero hardcore poor status by the end of May. He also said the government's effort to eradicate hardcore poor was not something rhetorical, but rather something that could be implemented with systematic collaboration and coordination. He said various mitigation measures, including strategic collaboration between agencies, were aimed at minimizing data leakage or extreme duplication when distributing aid to the needy.
On another note, the Pulau Pinang government plans to hold a workshop with stakeholders within a week or two to finalise the Penang-Mutiara Line Light Rail Transit LRT project following minor amendments to the original plan. Chief Minister Chow Kon Yeow said the workshop is held so that further work involving the transformative infrastructure project could be carried out.
MRT Corp telah memberi taklimat kepada Majlis Tindakan Pembangunan Negeri Pulau Pinang tentang projek LRT laluan Mutiara, di mana setelah keputusan Jemaah Menteri yang meluluskan projek ini, MRT Corp telah melakukan kerja-kerja teknikal dan mencadangkan setigit pindaan kepada plan asal yang disediakan oleh SRS Konsortium dan juga penyambungan ke Penang Central.
Met by reporters, Chow said the alignment needed to be finalised so that other work, including land acquisition, designs, station locations and so on, could be finalised.
Kerana Investment Bank Berhad has maintained its forecast that Malaysia's gross domestic product GDP would grow at a faster rate of 4.5 to 5% in 2024 from 3.7% last year, following an improved manufacturing performance in April.
The seasonally adjusted data released by S&P Global yesterday showed that Malaysia's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index (PMI) rose to 49.0 in April from 48.4 in March, suggesting an improved GDP growth. Commenting further on the matter through a note, Kenanga said the improvement was due to a significant increase in external demand, marking the first improvement in 12 months. Overall, the investment bank kept its GDP forecast for the first quarter of 2024, 1Q 2024, unchanged at 3.3% versus 3% in 4Q 2023, compared to the Department of Statistics DOSM advanced estimate of 3.9%. It also said growth is expected to accelerate in the second half of 2024 to H 2024 due to the lower base effect recorded last year. The PMI reading above 50 points indicates an expansion in the manufacturing sector, while below 50 indicates a contraction. Meanwhile, MIDF Amanah Investment Bank Berhad's research unit MIDF Research has kept its forecast on Malaysia's exports of goods to rebound by 5.2% in 2024 from a contraction of 8% in 2023 following the better manufacturing data in April.
A panel of certification experts convened by the Malaysian Palm Oil Council (MPOC) has assessed the ability of the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil MSPO certification to serve as a tool for compliance with the European Union Deforestation Regulation (EUDR).
In a statement today, MPOC said that during a recent MPOC Webinar 3.0, European Forest Institute technical expert Dr. Josil Moray presented a gap analysis of MSPO and EUDR and highlighted many areas in which the MSPO is a successful certification. MSPO Certification and Operations Services Manager Tan Chi Yong meanwhile said the MSPO has progressed since its introduction in 2013 and highlights the new key sustainability requirements found in the revised MSPO Standards 2022. He also shared potential solutions for the Malaysian palm oil industry to meet the EUDR requirements, which included upgrading the MSPO Trace platform and aligning MSPO's forestry-related definitions with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, or EUDRs. POC Chief Executive Officer Belvinda Kaur Sron noted that discussions with both European and Malaysian experts reached the same conclusion that MSPO is a world-class certification standard and is valuable for exporters as they seek to comply with the EUDR.
And now we move on to the next segment of our bulletin, On the Table. Over to you, Brandon.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome back to the show. This week, both the Prime Minister and the Human Resources Minister have pledged that wages or minimum wages are set to increase, with civil servants having a wage increase by December. As for the private sector, it remains to be seen whether companies would oblige to the government's calling. And with us to discuss this further, we have via a video call Distinguished Professor of Economics at the Asia-Europe Institute, University of Malaya, Dato Dr. Raja Rasya. Prof, it's good to have you back on the show. Firstly, with the rising cost of living and a declining ringgit, is the private sector willing to raise minimum wage, Prof?
It's a good question, and I shall start with recognition and the fact that I'm glad both the Prime Minister and the Minister involved are indeed concerned about that and making efforts to correct that. But let's first begin with whether the cost of living is rising. Well, I believe that we've had circumstances, we have a situation where the workers have been living below standards that we require. Because when you're talking about a minimum wage, you're actually talking about a wage that is sufficient to support a poverty line income. And this is not hardcore poor as such. Now, it takes, like what Phil Alston mentioned, and we have corrected it since, it takes account of inflation plus the fact that the standard of living of the country has risen. It adjusts for that. Now, I think it's in that sense the right move, and I think what the PM, as well as the Minister, is doing makes a lot of sense. So I think we have to talk from that perspective. But again, remember that I just mentioned that it is based on the cost of living. Has the cost of living really gone up? My own feeling is the official statistics we use shows low inflationary figures. Let's assume, and there's no reason to contest, our stats department is giving us the right statistics, which means to say that the cost of living still looks high when it comes to food inflation, for example, which actually targets the poor a lot more than the rich because the poor don't have any savings. Now, the second point here is that we have stayed too long in relatively low income, and therefore we don't really see the fact that that cost has already been fairly high for a long time and not corrected for many, many years. And I think the initiative by the PM as well as the Human Resource Minister to correct that by raising wages is a good move.
Right. And do you think this move is a little bit too late, Prof? Or do you think that this is actually the right time? Because if it's not going to be implemented now, then when would be that perfect fit to this picture altogether, Prof?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me when the room to have done it earlier, of course we can't go back in history. Yeah. But it's never late. You should, when you recognize that, you should act immediately. I think that's what Prime Minister and the Minister involved have done. So I think we have no time. We just have to proceed with that. I believe it's in December when they're going to implement that.
Brilliantly said. Now, to offset this endeavour, would perhaps subsidies on certain industries alleviate the burden? We're talking about private sector right now. To increase minimum wage on their employees. Your thoughts on this, Prof?
Yeah, I believe that it's in order, and I think that is headed by our economics minister, to subsidize wages for, I think, I can't remember the exact firms, I think it's talking about 1,000 firms. I think that's a good initiative, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be monitored carefully. But whether the private sector will follow, the one area that all firms in the formal sector will have to follow is the minimum wage. That's why I've always mentioned that you need a minimum wage, even though the minimum wage may not be the progressive wage that the minister involved talked about. And it's hopeful that the medium wage would rise from 2,600 in 2023 to 4,510 by 2030. Now, if it manages that, fine, except that I have some concerns only because it's predicated on an annual average GDP growth rate of 6.5%. We had a great growth, but that's only because we were contracting earlier, 8.7% in 2022, and then last year we had 3.7 actually gone down. We expected to get around 5%, 4 to 5% this year, still below the annual average GDP growth rates that we had assume that will take place over the years until 2030.
Right, right. Now, Prof, on the other hand, it's widely expected that new taxes introduced this year, let alone foreign investments into the country, would help in the government's efforts in raising wages for civil servants. Prof, your comments on this?
It depends. Again, we have been introducing a range of taxes simply because it is true that the taxes we collect is not even enough to pay for operating expenditure, OPEX.
Right.
I mean, I shall not reveal certain confidential things, but I think the idea of introducing many of the different taxes, some taxes actually go to those who are rich.
Right.
For example, luxury goods tax, yes, and some taxes go to those who are not poor, including taxes on capital gains on shares. I suppose those things make sense, except that I think it should be laid against whether we are taking a competitive position not to scare away businesses or not to scare away economic activities that would otherwise evolve here, grow here.
Right.
Now, again, coming back to it, I'm sure the minister knows more than me because he has data in hand. I don't have that sort of data. But just to make a point, a lot of these taxes also apply to the poor.
Yeah.
The poor are also paying SST, even if they introduce what I gather from the press. An attempt to use HSST, it will be the same. You are still reaching the poor with taxes. Now, my thing is, I believe the minister is well informed about this, that we are with a purposive program to ensure that what we collect is indeed going to resolve that problem. Because if you're going to have a situation where our payables, our debt increases faster than our tax collection, you're going to fall off the cliff at some point. So my feeling is, again, I believe we are in good hands, but I'm just concerned about that we are actually getting away from that trap, because in our initiatives to help the poor, which is really a noble idea, which is also why the Prime Minister suspended the MRT3, only because he was concerned that the poor cannot be burning up their EPF money, because that's meant to support them when they're old. I think that was a real noble move that I congratulate him for. And that also means that we have to see what sort of taxes we are introducing, whether it will have a bearing on the poor.
Right. Thank you so much, Prof, for mentioning and giving your take on this. Now, in the medium to long run, if the wage policy is made necessary and specifically targets certain sectors and occupation, now it could contribute to higher salaries and increased productivity. Do you have anything to add on about this particular questions, or maybe have your take on this as well? Could this make a difference at the end of the day?
I think it does, in the sense that we can't possibly attempt to protect industries that in the long run should not be here. I'm not making the point that structurally certain industries allow for higher value-added activities. It's just indeed true. Right. But again, structural change requires that we increasingly move to higher value-added activities, so long as we make sure that the share of wages does not get smaller compared to profits enjoyed by the owners of production, then I think we are okay. In that sense, we take care of the essentials of the poor. And to also ensure that Malaysia shows rising standards of living, because that's what it means to be a more developed country, rather than a country where you have high inequalities. The large bulk of them live in squalor, and a few of them are extremely rich. That's not what I like that fact too, because the PM also talks about that. Now, coming back to this, I think this needs some sort of, and again, you started with the concerns that the YB of Human Resource Minister mentioned. In the world of globalization, a lot of work skills required and so on are flexible. That's also true. Now, the thing is, it's proliferating in industries very differently. So my feeling is, while the statement is right, I like it very much, but I think we require a lot of coordination to make sure implementation gives us the desired results.
Right, right. Now, Prof, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we have to get your take on this. So, higher wages would more often than not translate into higher purchasing power to the consumers. Would this have an effect on our consumer price index?
Yes, indeed. Typically, the immediate effect of raising wages, especially so when it comes to the low-income group, because they are in dire straits. You just mentioned that cost of living has gone up. They would spend it, and therefore the direct impact will be inflationary. Now, I believe the minister concerned is aware, and I hope he has the instruments that have been prepared for him to see that all initiatives are taken to see that it doesn't translate into high inflation. We took a long time to address inflation, especially because of COVID-19, because a lot of that inflation was caused by supply problems, shortages in supply, disruptions in supply, rather than demand rising higher than supply. Now, what I think will be the case, that should not prevent us from introducing rising wages. After all, it's not really that much more that the poor is doing. I myself will, if you follow, because I see confusing alternative statistics being presented in different newspapers, but I see between 8% to 13% is the figure officially that I got. Now, I'll get 8% rise, not that I'm looking for it, but the increase I will face is still much higher than what the poor guys are going to get.
Yes, that's right.
Let's not quibble with the fact that the starting base is very small still for those others. I hope these things will be taken into account. And of course, we all want our country to do well. My only feeling is that initiatives are taken, instruments are in place so that we are ready to combat inflation. And again, a lot of this inflation we face are not done internally because we're a small country, highly integrated in the global economy. What happens elsewhere will have an impact here, including the interest rates. Although Jerome Powell, the current chair of the Fed in the US, hasn't raised Fed rates from 5.25 to 5.5% now from July last year. So for almost a year, we are sticking with that, but it's still, interest rates there are still that much higher than our 3% OPEX rate in Malaysia.
Right. Prof, unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for tonight's On the Table. Now, we thank you so much for being with us, Prof. We'd like to thank you, Dr. Raja Rasya, Professor of Economics at the Asia-Europe Institute, University of Malaya, on his valuable insight. Once again, Prof, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you over, talking to us about economics, business, so on and so forth. Prof, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
And that's all the time we have today on the table, and it's back to you.
Thank you, Brendan. It was indeed very informative. And that's all we have got for tonight. Together with Brandon Lepole, I am Olivia Nicholas. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thanks for watching.